this illuminated letter project that I'm doing on a calligraphy benediction, I am going to show you today how I apply the gold metal leaf. This is not 24 karat or 23 karat gold. This is a mica based gold leaf sheet. It's often called gold leaf, but I'm going to call it gold metal leaf because it's made with particles of the shiny ore called mica incorporated into the process of making these sheets. So you see that I have the calligraphy done already. Some people do it the opposite way, where they'll do the gold leafing first and the art scroll work around the gold leaf second, and then do the calligraphy third. I would prefer to do it in this order because I have less confidence in my calligraphy, I guess, than I do in my ability to fix errors in the illuminated letter. So once a letter is written incorrectly or done poorly in the calligraphy, I just start over. So that's why I'm using this process going in this order. So what you see here is a brush, a regular watercolor brush I'm using on watercolor paper, 100% cotton. I believe this is Arches paper, and I have the design penciled in, and I am now ready to apply the gold metal leaf to the paper. After that, then the process will be to add the inking and the watercolor and the gouache. I used all three of those media to complete the letter. The substance here that you see me using is called Adhesive Size. This is the sticky glue that's going to hold the gold metal leaf down. And because I'm using watercolor paper, I am going to be applying 2 coats. On the instructions for this size it says 1 coat, but the watercolor paper absorbs it so much that I find that it works much better to use 2 coats. And you see as I turn the paper that it's shiny, it's wet, it's going on in a wet way. I'm using 2 different sizes of brushes because the thickness of the letter is very variable. It's very thin at one end, it gets thicker, so I wanted to make sure that I was applying it very carefully inside of the form of the letter, and so the very point of it is easier to get at with this smaller brush. I believe this is a size 2 round, and the other brush that I was using was a size 8. I'll put the materials down below. So as I laboriously go through this application process, just know that this is going to take this is the time to be very careful. It's going to take some time to apply, and after all of the size is applied throughout the whole letter in a careful way, you let it dry for 30 minutes, and then you're going to come back and do a second application. The nice thing is that once you have that first application down, it's soaked into the watercolor paper, but the second coat then doesn't require nearly as much time or care. It basically sits on top of the first layer that has now dried to the touch. It's not completely dry underneath, but it's okay to go ahead and apply the second coat. You let the second coat dry for 30 minutes, and then you're ready to apply the gold. So I'm going to let you just watch now as I finish the application process of the Adhesive Size. This is a Speedball brand of size. You can find it in any art supply store. And the other thing that they often will sell together with the size is the sealer, and you'll see that at the end of the video I will have applied a sealer coat. So there you see now that I've finished both coats of size. I've waited the 30 minutes in between each, and now what you're seeing is the preparation to apply the gold metal leaf. Gold metal leaf is a little sturdier than 24 karat gold. 24 karat gold, you have to be very careful not to have any fans on or anything, any air blowing around. The gold metal leaf is a little thicker and goes on a little more easily. You see that I have a full sheet and it's attached to a piece of wax paper. So often it'll be sold in packages that have wax paper in between, or you can actually just set a whole sheet of wax paper on top of the gold metal leaf sheet itself. Rub your fingers across it, which creates static electricity, so that the gold metal leaf sticks to the wax paper, which is what I did here. Then you can just pick the whole sheet up and it stays attached to the wax paper, and then you can set it right onto your project. After I pressed it with my fingers, now I'm rubbing it to stick better with a tissue, and going along the edges is most important. Don't worry if you find that when you pick up the excess there are tiny little places where the size didn't adhere the gold metal leaf, because you can always go back in and touch up those little imperfections with another coat of size, wait 30 minutes, and attach just the tiniest little bit. I remember when I was first starting this process, learning how to do it, I thought, well, if you go back in over just a tiny little corner of something that didn't adhere, isn't it going to look like there's a seam or some imperfection? And surprisingly, it really doesn't show at all sometimes, and just the tiniest little bits and other times, but it's really not offensive if you see that you've had to redo a corner or an edge, or even in the center maybe you missed a spot, and it's very forgiving in that way. So now what I'm doing is picking up the excess. It really is immediate. So you've done your diligence about getting the size on and applying it to the paper. Now the fun part happens when you pull the excess off. I just set the sheet aside, and now take a fairly stiff paintbrush. This is just something that I found in our workshop that I think we must have used for some house painting corners or something. It's a springy, stiff brush, and you just run the brush along the edges, and you see how nicely that shape is coming out. The center of the A was a little trickier because some of those parts are thinner, and I wasn't sure that the size was going to be able to adhere every little nuance of it. I'm quite concerned about making sure the points are good inside of that triangle of the A, and the points on the top and bottom of the form. After I get the biggest pieces off, I actually want to save. I don't ever like to throw anything away, so I have a little container where I put the extra pieces. Some people just throw this away. These sheets, when you buy them in quantities of 25 or 100 sheets in a package, I think they come out to be about 40 or 50 cents a sheet. So it's not like you're losing a lot if you're just throwing away the excess, but you actually can find these pieces that you could purchase in the art supply stores, a lot of times people just use the flakes, is what they call them, gold medal flakes, and I might as well just start my own collection because I do enough of this that the flakes come in handy for some of my less less finessed works. If I'm doing something that is larger, I can just smear the flakes all over. Or if it's a greeting card that I know I'm not going to be framing, just sending to someone, I might use the flakes instead of the sheets. So you see the form now of the letter coming out very nicely here. And even after this process was finished, you'll see in just a moment that I still wanted the edges to look more finished, more polished, more the shape smoother. And so I just came up with this idea, since I do calligraphy and I have lots of nibs around that I throw away when they're no good anymore. I thought, well, maybe one of those old nibs that's really not good for writing calligraphy anymore might be able to be used. So you'll see in just a moment that I pick up my oblique pen with an old nib, and I'm going to go around the edges to smooth them out, get rid of any excess gold leaf that might have stuck a little bit outside of the smooth line, and just shape it up a little bit better. It's really quite beautiful. One thing that you need to think about in deciding whether you're going to use gold metal leaf versus 24, 23, or 24 karat gold is, of course, the cost of the 24 karat gold is going to be, instead of 40 cents, it's about $4, $5 a sheet. So that's the biggest, that's the first difference. The other thing is that 24 karat gold does not need any further processing, but gold metal leaf will tarnish, so that's why you have to seal it. The other thing is that it's not, this gold metal leaf is a very flat surface, and depending on the type of size that you use to adhere 24 karat gold to a work like this, to watercolor paper or other types of papers, is that it can be a little thicker, which gives it a three-dimensional look, and then with that you can emboss it with various shapes or scroll work or even lettering. So it's not something that you would do with the gold metal leaf because of how flat it is. So now I'm just cleaning this up, getting rid of all the little extra particles, still using this rather stiff brush. And the next thing you'll see is what I do with the nib. Without any ink, by the way, it's just a clean nib. And now what I'm going to do is go around the edges and just fix them up. There are a couple of spots where I wanted the scroll work of the design to come right through over the top of the letter. So that's what I'm doing here, is scraping away the excess. I tried not to put size into that little tiny spot where the vine comes across the top, but that was a little harder to do, so I just scraped it away and it worked just fine. One is straight across, another one is angled. And at the end of the video you'll see a photograph of the finished design and how those vines come over the top of the gold metal leaf. Another one here across the bar of the A. Brush away the excess as you go. Very satisfying process. another solution to this edging issue is if you don't want to just leave it gold against the background of white paper, you can outline it. A lot of times you'll see in especially old manuscripts and ancient calligraphers and illuminators in old documents that there is an outline. You certainly can do an outline in a work like this, but I decided that I really liked the look of the white against the gold without having a black or a dark brown line. I even tried, just in experimenting, some gold ink. I have some Dr. Martin's gold that I use often when I'm doing calligraphy, and it writes beautifully. And I outlined a sample of this gold with that gold, and they didn't quite match up. And then the gold ink was a little thicker. This is a very thin substance, and the gold ink laid down thicker than what the gold metal leaf was, and I just didn't like that look as much. But certainly experiment with that if you're thinking that these edges are difficult to get smooth and to look beautiful on the page, that outlining can be a good solution to that problem. I will say that the rest of the design I did with Sumi ink and used a pointed pen nib with an oblique holder. That's what I used in the lettering as well. And one problem that I had was that the Sumi ink is not waterproof. So after I drew the design in, then I painted the coloring, and I had to be very, very careful when I added the colors not to get the ink wet, because the black ink would bleed into the design of the leaves and the flowers that are intended to be a bright red or rose color with a dimensional darker red, or the blues, same thing, a lighter blue and a darker blue, and I didn't want the black bleeding into it. So there you see some of the work of the pencil mark and the ink drawing, and then the final product. Thanks for watching.